Welcome to this somehow unusual and different video. The images that you just saw are from 2019 and 2020, when we had a lot more rainfall and were hopeful to be able to build a farm. Since then, we have sunk a lot of money into buying material, paying people and building things. Not without success, but we are still not a working farm selling produce or food to actual customers. We do have a web shop on our website kaimito.eu, and thanks to some of you, we actually have been selling food, mostly the ham, but also the chili that you see here. So that was a good start, and we even sold a whole leg of ham to a customer in Germany who is also in the topic of land restoration. So thank you for all that. We've had, and we still have, a larger number of animals, most notable this herd of bovines. At the height of our cattle ranching, I guess we had 48 head of cattle, which is quite something and also creates a lot of work. You have to take care of the animals and also participate in a lot of government-mandated health checks. And here and there is an animal that has to be removed by order of the veterinarians, for example, because it contracted tuberculosis. We also planted quite a few trees and also learned about caring for a lot of other types of plants. However, despite the fact that this all has been fun, there are a number of issues. And I don't want to go into each of these issues now. The idea is to look forward, and so let me start by giving you an overview. I'd like to show you a number of maps and explain where we are and where we are going to. The entrance to our land, which is a narrow strip, at the top part in the image, you can see it, the yellow part, is about a kilometer as the bird flies from a water reservoir. Then there is a creek, which in Spanish is called an arroyo, which is the outflow of the water reservoir. It carries water all year around, and it's basically the amount of water that seeps underneath the dam. Previous owner had built a well right next to this creek, and it is one of our water sources. Now, here you see the whole 45 hectares of the land we own. In the center there's the compound, and then we have Zone A to the left and Zone C and D and E to the right, and I show you some more details now. Before I do, let me mention this. This very narrow and long piece of land is of an awful design. It makes it difficult to implement certain ideas that always assume that you have the fields around your compound and then you can manage them, and basically the ideal farm is probably a rectangular shape. And we do have a rectangle, but it is very narrow and it creates some challenges. Some of you have mentioned in the videos very good ideas, and our topography does not really lend itself to implement these ideas easily. As people have told me also, this land was not like this the whole time. It is a piece of a much larger piece of a much larger piece, and so basically in the recent past, some decades ago, it was part of a marginal one that went all the way to the road. You see below the yellow part, there is a gray line, and that is a public road. It's a dirt road, but it's an official road. And there were apparently two brothers, and they split this, and then one brother sold something like that. Let's start talking about some ideas for the future now. I am borrowing some concepts from permaculture, where they divide the land into different zones. Zone 0 is basically the dwelling where the farmer lives, and then you have zones 1 to 5, and the main factor that distinguishes these zones is the amount of time you spend in each zone and how frequently you are there. We do live on our land. It's the house with the blue roof there, but this Zone 0, our house, is not so much of interest for this, And it's also a temporary building, so we made this just to be here. And it's not really a house. It sits on loose cinder blocks. I built it with my own hands using a nail gun and stick framing. There are a lot of issues and it's going to be replaced at some point. Which leads us to talk about Zone 1. So Zone 1 would be the compound. As you can see there, it is roughly 9,000 square meters in size. And it's kind of round. And it has all the buildings and other pieces of infrastructure in it. And that is where we want to focus first and for a while. Due to the shape of our land, which is a narrow strip running about 2 kilometers from one end to the other, and at the widest point is just 350 meters wide, we end up having 2 times a Zone 2. That is the place where you are active multiple times a week, while in Zone 1 you are active multiple times per day. So one of our 2 Zones 2 is roughly 34,000 square meters, so 3.4 hectares, and sits in the north of the compound. The other Zone 2 sits in the south of the compound, is a little bit larger. You can see 36,000 square meters, 3.6 hectares, and this also contains the pond that we dug a while ago. Previously, we have talked about this zone that you see here as our Zone B, and we will do so in the future. So just as a reference to the permaculture concepts, I call this a Zone 2. It's because the amount of time you spend there and the degree of activity that will happen there. So the plan for going forward is to plant there a lot of trees and also use this for the new poultry experiment. So there we will plant a lot and we will run some chicken tractors and have other types of poultry in there because it is very, very close to the compound and to the temporary house, the blue building. I can walk out the door and within a few minutes I'm just right in the middle of it. I don't have to use a car and drive somewhere, which is a hassle and would slow down the amount of visits. The other Zone 2, which is in the south, is made up of all the paddocks that we call A11 all the way to A18. And in there we also plant a lot of trees and other things, and this might actually now lead an opportunity or provide an opportunity to establish this wetland that we talked about a little while ago. Because there is the pond and we have a pump that is kind of a spare pump, and it's solar powered. It can run the whole day. It doesn't really matter, costs any electricity and nothing. And we can pump the water out of the pond to a high point, maybe there in paddock A11, and then distribute it via channels that we can dug using our backhoe. That should make the whole place moist, and we can line these channels with vetiver and other things and use that moisture to also establish other plants in a not exactly Miyawaki-style forest, but some sort of a forest. Of course, the palovnia trees will be part of the game because they grow so fast and provide so much biomass that they are definitely a very welcome addition to this land here to restore it. As I mentioned at the beginning, in permaculture, there are also the zones 3, 4, and 5. And we do have a zone 5 that's basically that kind of abandoned place in the very, very far north of our land where we rarely ever go because it is so far away. And also the access is a little bit difficult. But let's not go into all these details. Let's focus on the near future. So here is a little bit more detail about our Zone A. As you can see here, that is where the entrance to our land is. And it is almost 10 hectares in size, and it is 825 meters long. And we do have a water pipe running all along it. So you can imagine that this is a little bit a challenge. So whenever you want to do something, you need to take the car and take the material and whatever you need all the way down there. So this is definitely kind of a journey, a trip that you have to make in order to realize some work. On the other hand, for every helper, this Zone A is the place where they come in and go every day. So you could say to them, this is the zone 2, where they are multiple times a day or the week doing something. So it depends from where you see these circles in permaculture. But anyway, I wanted to show you also a profile of this area. These 10 hectares are roughly flat. Their elevation oscillates a little bit between 621 and 629 meters. So you can say this is at an elevation of 625. And it is mostly flat, which means water stays there. And that is also why there is less erosion, why the whole area always looks a little bit better, because all the problems that you have on a slope, they are non-existent there. And it makes a lot of improvement work a lot easier. So we definitely should do more there, just because it's the pretty face of the whole land. You come in there and see it right away. And access is also very simple. That should be it as a forecast and some explanation for the near-term future. So I will leave you here with some images of the past. And I just learned that this past is actually when the drought hasn't been around. So people say that until 2020 the rainfall was kind of normal, and then the problem started.